Alright, everybody, welcome back. This will be the short version of the F-14 Rio school. So we're in the Rio pit here, in case you couldn't tell. And so we're going to go over key bindings and the basics of lock, keep a target, all the different basic modes, and just kind of all the basics and how to select weapons, all the fun stuff. So all the basic concepts being Rio, we're not going to go over any tactics as far as using radar modes and all that fun stuff, and we'll go over the buttons that you'll need to bind. So first of all, as that guy goes, sorry for the bad frames, computers can't still really handle this, but so let's go ahead and look at what controls we need to bind. So since you don't have a joystick and a throttle, my recommendation is, I think you have a Bluetooth headset, so that means you should be able to bind Bluetooth, I think. I don't know. If not, just they should come with like a type, I forgot what it's called, but it's just like the standard Android general charger that you can plug in with a USB to your computer to your Xbox controller, and that allows you to bind certain buttons because it makes life a whole lot easier when it gets to this. So the HCU is basically the stick on the bottom right here, and so whenever I have a joystick, see if I move it, then it's recognizing my bindings, right? So if you just get your controller, then you can bind a stick to left. You can bind one stick is all you would need to bind to be able to move the cursor. So there's only two things you really need. So we're going to bind those two buttons. Okay. And then something else I want to bind that's not related to the 14 is the look, since you don't have track IR. Let me see. Yes, it's going to be these buttons, cockpit camera, these buttons, and you can bind these to a stick too, or you can bind them to arrow keys because it's not diagonal, so I can look left and then up, but I can't look left and up. So that's something else you'll need to bind, and we'll go over this again whenever you get in. And then the next thing you need to bind is, let's find it, trigger, no. See if I can get both of them to pop up. Okay, HCU full action, half action. So basically what the half action does is it allows you to move the cursor around on the TIDs, basically on the screens right here. And so that's why you want to bind these, because half action, which would be if you had a joystick, which would be the first D10, allows you to put the cursor up on the screen and move it around. And then full action is when you would squeeze the trigger to the second D10, and that would lock up whatever your cursor is over. So for this, if you're using a controller, I would do left trigger for half action and then right trigger for full action. So you can't move the cursor unless you put in half action. And we'll go over that in more detail. So now that we have that um, all over with, let me make sure there's nothing else we would really need. Everything else is clickable, and here's just some things for recommendations. See if we can range. Here we go. So these are some things you would need to bind as the range. You could bind these to buttons, and I'll show you how to add a modifier. So what I would do is I would add one button to a modifier. It's like holding down, a modifier is like holding down the control or alt button. It just basically doubles the amount of keybinds you can have. So for example, what I would do is I would bind like, let's say B, and we'll add B as a modifier. So then every time I press B, it opens up a whole new set of controls. So then I could press B and X, and that wouldn't be the same as just pressing X. And so we'll go into that. And so this range, although the knob's down here, it's just kind of nice to bind, but since I have track IR, it's not difficult to look right here and click the range knob. Azimuth isn't that big of a deal because the radar modes usually do the azimuth automatically. So we're going to go ahead, we have some targets set up, and we're going to go ahead and intercept them and show you the radar works. Okay, so we're at our, not our cruising out, but we're entered to the targets, and so we're going to go give her some symbology. So where you see this has the little 1 and the dash, and the dot, that means it's a waypoint. So it's not even a target, it's just the waypoint of what we're looking at. So that's just what direction is and basically how far. And we're going to give a couple other things, is this knob down here controls my range. That's 25, 50, 100, 200, and 400. Mainly we're just going to be using 100 and 200. Maybe 50, never really 25. Okay. So, in order to turn the radar on, you have this switch over here. It's a WCS switch. This is in standby, and then we're going to go and boot it to on. And so here we can see some targets popping up. And so the next thing we're going to need to do is we're going to need to come over to our flight computer. And we're going to get it all the way to target data. So all right click all the way to target data. And another thing is general rule of DCS is when you left click, a switch goes down. When you right click, a switch goes up. Okay. So now we're going to go over into, so now we're in target data. We're in range wall scan. We are going to go ahead and we're talking about these buttons. So these buttons control what my HCU does, right? So on this one, my HCU, as you can see, is moving around on the bottom TID screen. This is a top-down view. So this is not what we're looking at here. This is what we're looking at from above. So they are this close and that azimuth. So they're slightly off to our right, and they're about 50 miles, 25, maybe closer. And if we click on this third switch, this allows us to come over here and acquire targets over here. So basically what this does is this is not range, this is closure rate, okay? So when we have along this bottom half, this is cold. And cold means they're going away from us. And so if they're all the way down here, they're pretty far away from us. And then the top half of this is hot, so it means they're coming towards us and they're closing. If they're really up here, we should be really worried because we're closing pretty fast. And another way is, if we get it closer to here, you can see the little black dot right there. I don't know if you can see the black, frame. Yeah, there should be black dots, yep, popping up. So now we're going to go ahead and go back to this lower switch, which is HCU TID mode. And what we're going to do is we have our radar modes here. Only thing I want you to worry about is TWS auto. And what TWS stands for track while scan. So what this does is it allows us to track multiple targets at once. And that's helpful because the missiles receive radar guidance from our system, so they never get a launch notification until the missile is within 10 miles. So they never know we launched a missile until the missile is within 10 miles, and by that time it's usually too late. And so what TWS is going to do, it's going to automatically designate targets for us. So we know this guy's a hostile. So when we have our target data open, we're going to click on this third switch that's hostile. Okay? And there should be a little green arrow. It's pretty bright, but there's a little green arrow right there. So that means he's hostile. Okay? I'm going to jump back to the pilot seat, get armed up. Uh-oh. Armed up. Okay. Select the Phoenix. Air. Alright, so we are good to go. So if you see this guy flashing, that means this is the guy we're selecting. So whenever I'm armed up, what the Rio can do is he can press this fire button, and that fires the Phoenix. So we're going to go and fire Phoenix. So we're going to press and hold for 3 seconds. There's the Phoenix. And we're going to lock up the target behind him. Since it's flashing, that's the target behind us, that's the target we're going to shoot at. It's flashing, so we're going to fire again. And those are those targets. So now what we can do is we can go TV. Looking at on TV. And we can go ahead and look at the missile. Ooh, there we go. That was pretty quick. This guy's tracking off in the distance. Kaboom. Okay, so both those targets are down. So now that both those targets are down, we're going to go ahead and switch back to range while search. And range while search is just a basic scanning method. You can't lock up anything on range while search, or you can't shoot anything on range while search. So that's the basics of locking up a target, right? It's pretty complicated, but once you get the hang of it, it's pretty easy. So just things to remember, this is our range knob, okay? 25, 50, 100, 200, 400, okay? These are radar modes. The only button I want you to worry about is these two. The one that says TWS Auto and the one that says Range While Scan. Range While Scan is just what we'll use default until we're ready to fire at a target. And then another thing I want to do is the... so is there a proper name for this? Basically a flight computer. So at default it will be all the way over here. I think that's bit, so it's built-in test. So you're gonna right click. Left clicking is knob to the left, right click is knob to the right. So you're gonna go all the way over here to target data, and then worry about three buttons. This is friendly, this is unknown, so it's a bogey, and this is hostile, so it's a bandit. Whenever we lock up a target, and we know it's a hostile, you're gonna lock it up. And I forgot to demonstrate this, but whenever you lock a target, so I'm pressing half action trigger, right? See, I'm moving around my HCU, but nothing's happening because I'm not pressing half action, okay? So in order to move, for the cursor to appear, I need to press half action. And to lock up something, I'm going to press full action and see how it locks it up, but there's nothing there to lock onto, so it's just going to return to normal. See, if I had something locked up, it would highlight and select it. Then we could go over here and designate if it was friendly, hostile, all this stuff. So what you would do is you go to a target, you'd select it, and then you click this button right here, which is hostile. Okay? Those are the basics of using a radar and radar guided missiles. We're just going to go over jettison and weapon select. So the basic weapon jettison is tank jettison. So these two are our tanks, right? So we're going to select, if you right click, it selects them. There's the SEL button, it's pretty hard to see. But your graphics should be a little bit better, so you should be able to see these a lot easier. It'll be a lot easier to read. So then we select those, but we don't have any tanks. So normally, you would select these. So you'd right click, and since master arm has to be on, so the pilot has to flip the master arm switch up. And then you'd right click on jettison, and then you'd hear the tanks drop. And then you'd unselect them, and that's that. And then here we go then let's go over bomb. And I'll help you with this because it's pretty complicated. So we're going to go to weapon select. Ooh, okay. Actually, we're not going to go over bomb because I'm not too educated on that. So we'll worry about bomb later, and we'll just kind of learn that on the go. Everything else is not really important right now unless you're doing a cold start, which we won't be doing, so we'll be doing a hard start. So that's everything you need to know about being a Rio.